Hello, my name is Dr. Tom Bennett from the Battleship New Jersey and Kane University Oral History Program. Today is September 19th, the year 2008, and we're aboard the Battleship New Jersey in the Executive Officer's cabin just off the wardroom. And today I'm interviewing Mr. Lloyd R. Crain, Jr. of Mastic Beach, New York, from Long Island, who served as a hospital corpsman first class aboard the Battleship New Jersey during 1969. And I also just found out he served with the newly formed 5th Marine Division, which was under the operational control of the 1st Marine Division. Was that served before or after?
That was actually administrative orders of the 1st and operational orders of the 3rd.
From the 3rd. And was that before or after you served?
That was way before.
It
was in 66.
Well, sir, first of all, thank you for carrying out the interview with us today. Let's start talking a little bit how you got in the Navy, and then how you worked with the Marines ashore, and then let's get on to the battleship. How'd you get in the Navy?
Well, came home one day from high school. I was 17, 6 days after I was 17 actually. Walked over to my father, says, "Dad, I want to join the Naval Reserve." He said, "Good, jump in the car, and I'll drive down and sign you up." That night, I was in the Navy. Went through reserve training while I was in high school. When I graduated high school, I went to on active duty, and I went to hospital corps school.
How long was, talk to me a little bit about hospital corpsman school. That was fairly
16 weeks.
fairly intensive, wasn't it?
Well, 16 weeks of school trains you as much as like 2 or 3 years of nursing. And after the 16 weeks of hospital corps school, I was over in St. Albans Naval Hospital for a while, and I applied for field med school to work with the Marines.
You knowingly applied for field med school?
Of course.
You want to be, what year was this?
65.
And you knew the Vietnam War was starting to heat
Oh, yes.
up? Good.
It didn't bother me. I mean, I wanted to see if I could help people. Because as a corpsman, that's what my job was.
And so what is field med school like compared to corpsman school?
Okay, field med school trains you to work with the Marines in the field. You dress like a Marine, you act like a Marine, you carry a rifle like a Marine, and you learn Marine tactics. This way you know what's going on when you're in the field with
So
them.
you had a lot of basic infantry training then?
Right, well, 6 weeks.
6 weeks, which is a fair amount.
And it's also, you learn like field sanitation, how to build a sink and everything.
Did they have Marines training you at any point as far as
That's who was our trainers. Marines were trainers.
your drill instructors or something?
Right.
And how were these people? You're the first person I ever interviewed who went to the field corpsman school. How the Marines treat you as Navy personnel?
Well, they treated us pretty good because they knew what we were doing. They knew we weren't Navy. We didn't have the training they did with the Marines. But they pushed us to because we had to learn to keep up with the Marines.
No, I have to say, I normally don't do this during interviews, but I worked with corpsmen in Vietnam. They were top-notch people, very brave, go out getting shot at. A lot of them got hit a lot of times, taking care of
Well,
people.
I got wounded 5 times.
There it is. Well, you're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. So you're finished with your field school, and where do you go to next?
Then I went home I went back to St. Albans Naval Hospital for a while until I got my assignment, which was with the newly formed 5th Marine Division. I went to California, Camp Pendleton. And I was there for approximately 2 months. And then we went over to Vietnam.
And at Camp Pendleton, what did you do there?
I was with a Marine unit.
Training for Vietnam.
Training,
Did you
right.
run the hills in Pendleton?
Oh, yes.
Because I was at Pendleton also, and I know those hills very well, yes.
And Case Springs, out in the field.
So you go to Vietnam, and where do you end up in Vietnam?
Well, our first 2 months in Vietnam was helicopter assaults. And the scariest thing, our first day in combat, we had over 2/3 casualties.
And where did this occur?
It was a place they used to call the Three Gates of Hell. We're just south of the DMZ.
Okay, way up in the I Corps.
And we had about 2/3 casualties, wounded, mostly wounded. We had a bunch killed, but the scary part of it was the original 5th Marine Division was almost wiped out on the island of Iwo Jima. We were helicoptered in off the USS Iwo Jima.
It's ironic. Yes. What did you run up against that caused such heavy casualties?
We were on this one road, and it was like an S-shaped ambush, and it was the first time we were ever in combat. And a lot of people, Marines and even if they run into combat for the first time, you're not too sure. So we had a bunch of casualties.
And so, where would you, when you're doing these helicopter assaults, where did you operate out of? One of the combat bases up in the I
No,
Corps?
out of the USS Iwo Jima.
Oh, off the Iwo Jima. So you're doing
Right,
these
we were doing
helicopter
float
assaults.
battalion for
Sure.
a while, for 2 months, and then they helicoptered us inland, and we were south of Da Nang at Hill 55.
Hill 55. And after this initial battle, I assume your group was pulled back, reformed again?
We were out for about 2 weeks, and then we get back to the ship, and I was checking on my wounded, and then we're getting ready for the next operation. So all the wounded were patched up and everything, and we're getting ready to go.
And for the historical record, from what I gather in Vietnam, 80% of our casualties were caused by shrapnel-induced wounds. Was that what you found?
Oh, we had a lot of bullet wounds too, but there was a lot of shrapnel wounds because we had they dropped mortars in on us from all over the place, and they'd sometimes hit the trees above the position, and you'd end up as an airburst.
Or they would fire the B-40 rockets into the trees purposely to explode?
We never really got we never got rockets. It was mostly the mortars.
The mortars got you, sure. Now, what happens after the group is reformed? What do you do next?
Well, we go back. We go to the Philippines for about 3 or 4 days to recuperate, and then we go out again. They needed our ship one time. They pulled us off there. We were getting one of the space capsules was coming in, so they needed the ship in that.
So they pulled the Marines off the ship?
Yeah, over in Subic Bay.
Left them in the Philippines and went to pick up the space, but they probably were needed very badly in Vietnam at the time, I would assume, too.
Well, we were just float battalion anyway, so we'd be helped wherever we needed.
Did you ever operate with a unit called the 9th Marine Amphibious Brigade? Because they were afloat, they were stationed in Okinawa, and they would have troops afloat, and then they would do the helicopter assaults into Vietnam.
No, we didn't really work with we were mainly just our own division, and then we went inland.
Now, anything else that you want to tell us about the Marines before we move on to the Battleship New Jersey?
Well, just that while I was with the Marines, I got wounded about
Why?
5 times.
How'd you get wounded?
None of it's on record, but I got hand-to-hand a couple of them. I got 2 scars. The people that did that didn't make it. I was from the South Bronx, so we knew about how to use a knife. And I got a bullet graze in the arm, got grenade shrapnel up and down my right side, and a punchy stake in my knee.
In the knee. Was the punchy stake covered with any human feces?
Oh,
or?
yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I had a
Which
nice
caused
infection.
Horrible infection.
I still have a little scar there.
Really good, yeah. And how did you treat that infection?
Well, I was the corpsman, so I had all the antibiotics I needed.
Now, were you mainly fighting North Vietnamese or Viet Cong?
Both.
Mixture of both. Yeah.
Because there was, our unit was, had sort of like a vendetta against North Vietnamese Division 324 Bravo. And they chased us all over. We finally got the better of them and wiped them out.
When did that happen, and what was the battle like?
Oh, I don't remember what the battle was, but they kept coming at us, and we'd rather fight the North Vietnamese than the Viet Cong, because the Viet Cong would hit and run. North Vietnamese would stay there and fight toe to toe, just about. And some of them were trained almost as good as our Marines.
Some were very good fighters here.
Yeah.
Did you ever operate in the Anwa area? Do you recall?
I don't know the areas. All I knew is I was anywhere from 19 miles south of Chulai to 2 miles north of the DMZ.
You cover the whole I Corps just about. You saw everything pretty much, sure. So you finish your tour of the Marines. How do you get to the Battleship New Jersey? How does that occur?
I went, I went back to the States. I went, and I requested battleship duty because they, like every so often, you put in your papers for what you want to do, and my term was for sea duty. So I put in for the battleship because I heard the battleship was in commission.
Oh, specifically for the New Jersey.
Right. Well, it was the only battleship up. And I volunteered for battleship because my father used to say he was the last battle wagon sailor in the family.
Which
He
ship
was on the Missouri.
on the Missouri. And we talked a little bit before the interview about the friendly competition between
Right.
the New Jersey and the Missouri over the peace signing in World War II.
And he also got to meet Bull Halsey personally.
What did he say about Halsey?
Well, he was standing in an inspection one time when Bull Halsey was inspecting, and he was standing in his shower shoes. And Bull Halsey wanted to know why he was in his shower shoes. So my father reaches in his pocket and hands him a paper from the doctor saying he's not supposed to wear shoes. Bull Halsey calls for the doctor. Doctor comes running over. He says, "Yes, sir." He says, "Why is this man in my inspection in shower shoes?" He says he has a foot infection, a fungus infection. He cannot wear shoes until I tell him he can. And he says, the doctor says, "I run the medical field. You run the rest of the ship." So Bull Halsey
doctors, I
said,
know,
"Carry on, doctor."
Doctors and dentists did do those things to officers. I've seen that.
So my father used to man the crane on the battleship, and our last name is Crain.
And he actually would pick the ships out of the water then.
The planes.
The airplanes, I'm sorry, the airplanes, the seaplanes
The
out
float
of the water.
planes, yeah.
Yep, right. Now, what do you work in the medical area on the ship, which is up forward, down below. And
Right, between
describe-
turret 1 and 2.
Yeah, describe the medical area up there. It's different than it is now. The ship
It
is
is-
in a 1980s configuration.
Well, it's a little changed. Most of it's the same, but there's still quite a bit that's changed, that's new. Like where the officer's stateroom was, the doctor's office is. There used to be a small area with a couple more bunks, and I held midshipman crews and lectures there, or in the mess hall, and then I gave them quizzes back there. But I was responsible. I'd hold sick call for first the beginning, like when they first come down to be sick. I'd log them in. I'd do minor surgery, like cutting out planters, warts, and stuff. And we worked the lab. We had an X-ray department in there. We have a fully functional operating room. One of the gunner's mates had gotten hurt, and they show it on the History Channel.
Andrew Tobias.
Right.
I interviewed him.
But the thing is, they never said that he was operated on at first here. They just said he was sent out.
Well, what Andrew Tobias told me, I have the tape, he said one man, a large black man who he knew, carried him down.
Wayne Johnson.
Wayne Johnson, and carried him down Broadway to the medical area, and the Captain Snyder evidently slowed the ship down so it would rock or move. They took him back to Subic Bay, where I guess they helicoptered him off.
Yeah.
But he said they operated on him here. Lots of men donated blood, and as a result of that, he's alive, and he's working in New Jersey for the state, in the printing shop for the state.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you involved in that operation?
No, that happened just before I came on.
What would so if we would walk down to the medical area today, there wouldn't be that much difference as far as the setup goes and the
The setup is
operating
pretty
room?
much the same. The operating room's still in the same place. They have actually an exam room is like almost set up like an operating room, and then you've got the operating room. Behind the exam room is the X-ray. Before the exam, before you go into sick bay, you've got your medical records and you've got the laboratory. And then behind the operating room, you have the ward. You have two entrances to the ward, one through the operating room and one right through the hallway or the passageway.
So that's basically the same today as it was
Pretty
then.
much set up.
As a corpsman, what were the common ailments you found aboard a ship like this?
Oh, food poisoning.
Really? Food poisoning?
Yeah, they had one episode. It was a bunch of guys ended up with food poisoning from chicken pot pie. In fact, the bugler, Bert, was one of them. Bert Trottier.
And the pot, it wasn't cooked enough, or the chicken was all?
I have no idea. All I know is we had a whole bunch of people in there sick.
Really? And what else did you find as far as
Well, we used to get guys coming in with venereal disease.
when you would stop in port someplace in Subic Bay, Philippines?
Right. Or Yokosuka, Japan, and the different areas.
And what would you treat them with at the time?
Well, it depends on different antibiotics. And my job was preventive medicine corpsman. I had to interview them, find out where they got it from, and take down all the information and send it to the Subic Bay or whichever town it was in, to their headquarters, so they could find the girls to get them treated.
Get them treated, sure.
Plus, I was also in charge of all the emergency medical gear on the ship. Like the first aid lockers. In all the gun turrets, they have small first aid cabinets. Half of them, the supplies were gone, and they were storing their girly magazines and their bottles of booze in there.
No, Navy people would never do something like that, would they? Never. So you maintain that. Did you give lectures to the crew about before they went ashore, say, guys, be careful?
Well, I tried. It's most of the time, they had someone else give the lectures for that. I was in charge of the midshipmen when they came on. I had to give them all first aid lectures. And then I had to quiz them on it.
Would this be for midshipman cruises or just during?
We had one midshipman cruise, and they came on in Long Beach. We went up towards to Bremerton, Washington, or Tacoma, Washington, and then back down. About 2 weeks. So we tortured the heck out of the midshipmen.
What did you do?
Oh, they'd have the food loading party. Navy personnel, case of apples, 70 pounds. Navy personnel, case of oranges, 70 pounds. Midshipmen, case of cabbages, 120 pounds.
So you made them work a little bit, learn what Navy's all about. Back to Vietnam. Did you ever run into any problems when the ship is on the gun line for weeks at a time? Any problems of exhaustion from the crew, mental exhaustion, just being tired out?
Well, we had one guy that came in and said he wanted to commit suicide. He had little tiny scratches on his wrist.
Was this off the coast of Vietnam? Or?
Yeah, this was off the coast of Vietnam. The guy was just trying to get out of work. The doctor turned around to him, and he knew he was being phony about it, so he says, next time what you do, you take the razor, hold it here, and pull straight up the arm.
And the guy never came back, I bet.
Nope.
He wouldn't do it. Did you have, I was in the military, and I knew certain people showed up in sick bay, the so-called sick bay commandos.
Well, we had another guy that was locked up in sick bay.
Really?
Leg irons and handcuffs. He was caught down in the powder handling room for the 16-inch guns, lighting matches, and tossing them in a wastebasket.
Wow. He had a death wish, that person, probably. And for
No.
the whole ship, too.
I don't know whether he had a death wish or not, but they brought him to sick bay, and the captain said he's to be in leg irons and handcuffs. And if he goes to the bathroom, he's escorted there, escorted back. The guy was a heavy smoker, and the captain took his cigarettes away from him and said, no more smoking.
So did they remove that man from the ship?
As soon as we got into an area where they could helicopter him off, I think he was court-martialed.
And off he went? How about Captain Snyder? He was your captain. What do you recall about Snyder?
Oh, most of the time, I've got the distinct record for closing the captain's coffee mess. My chief told me to go all through the ship. He handed me the medical book to show what the coffee mess was set up for and the do's and don'ts. And he says, any coffee mess that's not up to par, you close.
You mean that would be dirty?
Community cups, community spoon, stirring the coffee. They was all supposed to have individual cups, wooden stirrers. So I went around to all the ship and the captain's coffee mess. They had community cups, they had community spoons. So I closed the captain's coffee mess.
Where was it located?
Right near the captain's office, there's a personnel office. So the chief called me into the office. He says, Crain, you're doing a very good job. Stop.
You've gone too far.
But another time, I remember the captain called down to sick bay for the preventive medicine corpsman. We were in Subic Bay, and he was the senior officer afloat, which meant he was in charge of all the ships in port. And they were getting a lot of complaints from a Greek sub that was in port, that the stink and everything in it. So he had to go check the ship out, and he brought me with him. He went down first, since officers first, and as I was getting ready to go down, he almost knocked me over coming back up. He told their captain, he says, either clean this ship up or call your people off liberty.
That was a Greek ship?
Right, with a Greek submarine.
It was that dirty?
It was filthy. It smelled like old mutton and rancid.
So I guess the Greek Navy didn't have a good reputation for keeping ships clean.
Not really. So that captain called his men off liberty and they left.
And they left Subic Bay, off they went.
Yeah, they didn't want to clean up their sub.
Was it an old World War II submarine or something? It was
Yeah.
left over something?
But that's the main time I saw Captain Snyder.
Did they
Excuse me, could you close the door? We're having interviews.
Oh, sorry.
You didn't mind me saying that,
no,
did you?
This is on the tour, and so today it's off the tour, but not everybody got the message on that, so people have stepping in. So did people feel positive towards Captain Snyder?
Oh, everybody loved Captain Snyder. I mean, he was a man that nobody could talk bad about. At least that I heard of. I've never heard anybody talk bad about him.
How was the morale aboard the ship?
Usually it's pretty good. We had about 5 or 6 different movies a day from different areas. Like if it was a nice day, we'd have one up on the shining on the after gun mount. We had the closed circuit TV movie. We had one in each mess hall. The chief's mess had one. The wardroom had one.
Did people have a sense that this was a good ship to be on, a choice ship
Oh yeah.
to try and get on?
Everybody enjoyed being on, really. I mean, we had a good time when we went on Liberty too. I think it was with Ollie North's crew. There was some guy, I think there was some people in the Army with him, with that unit when they got overrun.
And we'll talk about that, sure, definitely.
I ran into some in Subic Bay, in one of the bars. They saw the USS New Jersey on my sleeve, and they asked me if I was on the ship when the guns were going off. I said, yeah. They said, your money's no good here.
Yeah, he did have, as a matter of fact, we'll talk about that, when Oliver North was a young lieutenant.
But I never met him.
Running a light platoon in the I Corps, and he evidently made a mistake. He doesn't know how. He got into either battalion or regimental area of NBA, and of course they attacked. They let him come in, and he had 2 armored personnel carriers with him, APCs, which are run by the Army, and a tank. I think it might have been an Army tank too. And only about 24, 26 guys in his platoon, very light patrol, and they were hit and almost overrun. And then, as I mentioned before the interview, the Battleship New Jersey ringed him with 5-inch gunfire. He put in a call for fire, and up came the Battleship New Jersey, said, we can help you. And then later in the morning, around 4 o'clock, they put out the 16-inch gunfire. You were on the ship at that time. Talk to me about, that was a lot of gunfire put out. You remember that?
I remember those guns all night long firing, the 5-inch. In the morning, the gun barrels had paint peeled off them. They chipped the paint right off the gun barrels, and the deck was littered with shells. Everybody got to grab a shell so we could make ashtrays out of them.
Is that what you do with them? I'll have to tell North if I ever run into him again. But he said literally when those 5-inch shells kept the enemy away, and then the 16-inch shells just blew holes in the ground you couldn't believe, and lots of enemy were up in the trees after that, just blowing many.
And the
hundreds of yards.
illumination,
Yeah,
the illumination was fired by a Coast Guard cutter.
Coast Guard cutter. And
I don't know which one it was, but they were sitting right next to us, just about.
Just shooting all night with the.
They had the 5-inch guns, but all they were shooting was illumination.
How close were you to the shore at that point? You must have been fairly close if you had a cutter.
Weren't really that close. I mean, they were about a mile off.
Because he was right near the coast. I think it was the Quaviet River and
Yeah.
some of the places up there, not far from the DMZ, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, but we were. I remember another time, but that one we weren't that far from the coast. Another time they were going to have us fire on an island called Tiger Island. And we were circling Tiger Island, and just before we were getting ready to fire, they called a bombing halt and said the New Jersey was like bombs. They can't fire. We had the Jersey, I think a couple of cruisers and a few destroyers.
And so what happened then?
Well, we couldn't shoot up Tiger Island. We were getting ready to sink the island.
Blow it away. Now, the New Jersey was fired on once, I believe.
Yeah, by an anti-aircraft gun.
Anti-aircraft gun. Talk to us about that.
I think they missed us by a couple of 100 yards. So they fired 3 rounds from the 16s. And there was a spotter plane flying around, and all you heard was, "You hit the island. It's crumbling. You sunk part of the island." The overhang that the anti-aircraft battery was completely chopped off the island.
Now, you were aboard the ship in 1969. I was in Vietnam in 69. I know I was in a combat unit. We didn't have any race problems, but in rear units they did. Okinawa they did. Did you have any problems like that aboard the ship?
Not really, not that I could see. I mean, I was in the medical department. We had some black corpsmen there too, doing the same jobs we were doing.
How were relations between whites, blacks, Hispanics on the ship at the time?
Everybody got along great. It was like a big family. I mean, everybody had like their own clan. Like, it was more like snipes and gunner's mates didn't get along that good because one was down in the hole, the other was up in the air. But it wasn't really racial.
Yeah, I've heard something like that because the ship was a very select ship to be on, and that the crew was picked largely beyond the ship. It wasn't just a run-of-the-mill ship. Did you sense that the crew was a notch above other crews? Did you have any sense of that, or am I wrong in that?
I just noticed that everybody got along with everybody. We'd go out on Liberty, we'd all drink together. Whether you're black, white, Spanish, didn't matter. We had one Indian guy we used to call Chief. He'd go out and get drunk, and I'd wake up at night to go hold duty in sick bay, and here he is, leg ironed in the bunk. Because he punched out some shore patrolmen. Yes, Chief, got drunk again. Yeah, Doc.
So there's no conflict on the ship right now?
No.
Yeah, interesting. Did many guys get in trouble? I'm just asking that when you're at sea for periods of time, you're on the gun line for 6 weeks or so at a time. Anybody break up, crack, get angry?
Not really. In fact, the brig we had on board was mainly used as a paint locker. It
So the
stored
Marines
supplies in there.
And there's no Marines aboard the ship to guard anybody in the brig
Right.
that had them off the ship. on
Right.
that
Well,
point.
they had the Master at Arms Force, but they didn't really have any problems like that.
Interesting. Now, is there anything I should have asked so far that I haven't asked about that you think is important to leave for the historical record?
No, just that everybody did their job on the ship, and we all got along.
By the way, after you were finished on the New Jersey, did you serve on any other ships or other duty posts?
I went back to the Marines again
Oh, where'd you,
for another tour of
you like Vietnam? Who'd you join up with this time?
9th Marines.
9th Marines, and they were located where? Is that 1970?
Mostly Pendleton,
Oh,
but I was with a battalion in Okinawa for a while. I was with 3rd Medical Battalion, and they were asking me if I had ever worked in a gas station. I said, yeah. He said, good, you're motor transport sergeant.
So they made you a sergeant?
No, I was with the Marines, but they
put you in
they
charge
told
of-
me I was motor transport sergeant because I worked in a gas station, so I had to help get all the military vehicles ready for float battalion.
Interesting.
They,
Now, how long did you stay in the Navy for then?
I was in 10 years, 3 months, 27 days. I forget how many hours and minutes.
And you left instead of staying in for 20?
Well, I had a disagreement with my last commanding officer, and he fixed it so I couldn't re-enlist.
That can happen sometimes. Yeah.
I mean, got an honorable discharge, but he fixed it so I couldn't re-enlist.
So would you have rather stay in the Navy, you think? Or?
I wanted to.
Sure. Now, after you're out of it, looking back after all these years, I ask a question of people. How did your experience aboard, let's say the Battleship New Jersey, impact your life? If any.
Yeah, the Battleship New Jersey itself didn't impact. I'm proud to tell people I'm a battle wagon sailor. But I was also with the Marines in Vietnam, so
Which had a bigger impact?
I think being wounded 5 times has a pretty good size impact.
Definitely. And being close up and serving with the Marines and close up to the NBA and Viet Cong and something
Right.
like that, sure, yeah. How has that impacted your life?
Well, I ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder. They were asking me, when I filed for post-traumatic stress, they said, what one incident makes you feel you had post-traumatic stress disorder? And I put on there, I was a combat medic with the Marines on the line, packing bodies and body parts in plastic bags on a daily basis. You pick the day.
And they said, okay. They let it go at that point, sure.
Plus, it also gave me a little diabetes.
I can see when I've asked people, say from the Vietnam period, if they served on a ship, like you said, it's been a good time, we fired and saw that. But if they were sure of the Army or Marines or something like that, it's a very, very different experience. And they've had, I'm sure you've looked at some of these studies they've had, how long it impacts people, the Navy, 6 months, maybe, Marines, 6 months to never, and so on like that, because of the intensity of your,
Attention all New Jersey vets.
the
There
situ-
is a bus on the pier.
the situation you're in and so on like that.
New Jersey
So any,
vets on board.
Lloyd, at this point,
Bus
any
on the
final
pier.
words that you want to leave for history? Because the tape will be stored aboard the ship. It'll be examined by historians in the future.
It's tough what to say for history. I mean, just that I was proud to serve on the ship, and I was also proud to serve with the Marines. I still did my duty.
And for that, we thank you. Seriously, thank you very much. I thank everybody who served on a ship, or in this case with the Marines for a period of time. As a young guy, I want to ask you, why'd you go to, field, what was it called?
Field med school.
Field Med School, because that was a 100% ticket into the Marines in 1965, which was sort of a
Well, that was how you got in with the Marines.
That's
You
it.
had to go to field med
Field Med School, something like that. And all the corpsmen I worked with in Vietnam were just outstanding people. I mean, they were just super people.
Well, the corpsmen in Vietnam were the ones that developed some of the triage they have in hospitals today.
Oh, really? Explain that.
It's just that the way we handled the treatment and everything in the battalion aid stations, that's how they took it from there and they put it in emergency rooms.
The ones you can save, you can save. The ones maybe, the ones who can take care, the ones you can't save,
Right.
maybe. The ones who can be okay in their
And
own.
how to handle it.
Sure.
Like I had one guy that got hit in the throat with a piece of shrapnel, couldn't breathe. What I did, I used to carry, I don't know if you're familiar with the little plastic tubes they had with flash bulbs on them back
Sure.
then.
Yes, yeah.
I used to save the little plastic tubes. This guy got hit in the throat. I popped a hole in his throat, and I stuck a plastic tube down there and taped it, so he was able to breathe.
Kept them alive. Sure. So things like that, immediate medical attention were developed a lot in
That
Vietnam.
they started developing it in Korea, and then they added to it 4 o'clock.
Now relieve the watch. On deck, section 1. Relieve the watch.
Brings back memories. And then they increased it in Vietnam, especially with helicopters, getting the medical emergencies out.
Right.
But us guys on the line had to get the people stabilized first.
Right. I know that was very important for us to stabilize them, keep them alive. The medevac will come in and pull them out. But doing that can be dangerous. All the corpsmen, for example, up in Khe Sanh were killed or wounded, who are running around. It's, when you expose yourself like that, it's very dangerous work.
We had one corpsman with us up at the 3 Gates of Hell. In the first battle, about 2 days later, they were on patrol, and they were in an area where someone had booby-trapped the gate to close behind the patrol. They were hit in an ambush. This corpsman grabbed one man and pulled him out and was wounded. Went back in for a second one, pulled him out, was wounded again, went back for a third one and was killed. He, originally, they were saying that all he was going to get was a Bronze Star because he was doing his job. I found out later that he got the Navy Cross.
Much more appropriate medal for something like that. Yeah, definitely.
But when we first heard that all he was going to get was the Bronze Star, a lot of people were pissed off.
Those things were given out quite easily in some cases, Bronze Stars.
So were some Purple Hearts.
When people shouldn't have gotten it. Even people running for the presidency, perhaps.
We had a Marine, the only Marine I ever really called coward to his face. Supposedly with that first hit we got, he was medevac back to the ship. And I didn't know about it at the time. When we got back to the ship, I went to check up on my wounded, and I asked about him. They said, oh, as soon as he got off the helicopter, he was helping carry stretchers. Supposedly, he hurt his back carrying ammunition. So after the 2 months afloat, we went inland. They had a Purple Heart ceremony. They gave him a Purple Heart for hurting his back.
For hurting his back.
That night, I was in sick bay. It was a bunker, and he come tumbling down a bloody mess. And I had to help patch him up. His fellow Marines let him earn his Purple Heart.
So careful. Sure, that happens. Yeah, just a side story, well, I'll let you go in a minute. One of my guys got hit in the leg with shrapnel. He was in a hospital, sent out, back to the hospital someplace. They gave him a Purple Heart, enemy fire. It turns out, somehow, upon investigation, weeks later, they said, oh no, that was a short round from a 105. Guess what they did with the Purple Heart?
Took it away from him?
He almost bled to death because it cut an artery in his leg. Almost bled to death. Had been married with a
He
kid.
should have still got the Purple Heart. It was a combat zone.
They took it away back then. Would you believe that? Well, Lloyd, thank you so much for talking with us. Today I've been talking with Mr. Lloyd Crain, who served aboard the Battleship New Jersey in 1969 as a hospital corpsman, and previous to that with the 5th Marine Division, elements of it. And he now resides in Mastic Beach, New York. Lloyd, thank you so very much, and thank you for serving your country in some very, very, very dangerous situations. Thank you much.
You're welcome.